I have been humming that song for 11 years. Not consciously, not as a practice or a ritual or anything I decided to do. It just comes out of me the way breathing comes out of me, without my asking it to, in the spaces between tasks, when my hands are busy and my mind is somewhere else and the silence wants filling in the particular way that silence sometimes does. My wife Rachel taught it to me. She used to hum it while she cooked, a habit she had picked up from her mother and had never lost, and in the years we were together, I absorbed it the way you absorb everything about the person you live with. Through proximity and repetition, and the particular osmosis of a shared life. After she died, I kept humming it, not because I decided to keep it, because it kept coming. Because it was in me the way she was in me, below the level of decision, available without being summoned. I have been a custodian at the Harrington School for the Arts in Evanston for 14 years. I have been humming that song in those corridors for 11 of them, ever since Rachel died, and I have never once thought about what it was doing to the air around me. Until the morning a 9-year-old girl heard it from the end of a corridor and walked toward it, and asked me what it was called. That morning I understood two things simultaneously. I understood that the song had been traveling further than I knew. And I understood for the first time in 11 years why I had never been able to stop humming it. If you have ever carried someone you loved in a habit, so deep you forgot it was a tribute, and only remembered when someone else received it, this channel is for you. Subscribe right now, because every story here is for the people who are still loving someone through the things they do without thinking, and who find out one ordinary morning that the love has been going somewhere all along. My name is Elias Bonner. I am 53 years old. I am the head custodian at the Harrington School for the Arts in Evanston, Illinois, which is a private performing arts school for children from kindergarten through 8th grade that has, among its many features, floors that I have mopped so many times I could mop them in my sleep, and corridors that I know the acoustics of the way a musician knows an instrument. Which is to say, I know where the sound gathers and where it disperses, and which walls hold a note, and which ones let it go. 14 years in a building is long enough to understand its character. The Harrington is a building with a lot of character. It was designed by someone who understood that a school for the arts needed to sound like one, which means the corridors carry music in a way that most buildings do not, which means that when I hum while I am working, the sound goes further than I typically intend. This is relevant to what happened. I am a single father. My son Isaiah is 27 years old, lives in Portland, works as a sound engineer for a recording studio, which is the most direct possible line from a childhood spent listening to his father hum in a building designed to carry sound, and which I consider, without any particular modesty, to be my finest professional accomplishment. His mother and I separated when he was 4. I will say this about those years of raising Isaiah alone, which is that they gave me something I did not know I was receiving at the time, which is a very particular attentiveness to a child who is navigating something difficult. Isaiah was not a difficult child. He was a child who felt things thoroughly, which is a different thing entirely, and who showed what he felt in his face in ways that most adults, busy with their own faces, did not notice or receive. I noticed. I was the only adult in the room most of the time, which meant that what Isaiah showed was mine to read and respond to or miss, and the stakes of missing it felt large to me, large enough that I became, over the years of it, someone who did not miss very much. Rachel helped with this in the years we were together. She said once that I read Isaiah the way she read her clients, with the whole body, not just the eyes. I said I did not know what that meant. She said it meant that I read him in every channel simultaneously, face and posture and sound, and the quality of his presence in a room, and that most parents read their children in 1 or 2 channels and miss the rest. I thought about this for a long time after she said it. I think it is accurate, and I think the reason it is accurate is not that I am especially perceptive, but that years of being the only adult in a room with someone who needed something they could not name will make you perceptive out of sheer necessity. The alternative is not noticing, and not noticing is not something I was willing to do. She is a good woman and a good mother, and I will say nothing against her. I mean that with the full sincerity of a man who has had 23 years to be certain of it. After the separation, it was me and Isaiah, and the years of it shaped me in all the ways that raising a child alone shapes a person, which is toward patience and presence, and a very acute sensitivity to what is happening in a room that has a child in it. Isaiah taught me to read a room. Rachel taught me the song. Between them they prepared me for the morning I am about to describe. I want to tell you about Rachel before I tell you about the song, because the song cannot be understood without Rachel, and Rachel deserves to be more than a background fact in this story. She was 40 years old when she died, which means she has now been gone for 11 years, and she was 40 years old for the whole of the time she was alive that I knew her, which is the strange arithmetic of grief. That the person stops aging while you keep going, and the gap between where they are and where you are keeps widening until they are young in a way that feels wrong for how much you love them. Rachel was a social worker. She worked with children and families in crisis for 16 years, and she was, by every account of everyone who knew her professionally, the kind of social worker who made people believe that someone was actually on their side, which is the rarest and most necessary quality in that work, and the quality that burns people out fastest. She managed not to burn out by coming home at the end of every day and cooking elaborate dinners that nobody needed to be as elaborate as they were, and humming the whole time she cooked. The humming was not performance. It was not even something she was fully aware of doing most of the time. It was just how she processed the day, in the kitchen, with her hands moving and the melody underneath everything. And I learned over 12 years to read the quality of the humming the way I learned to read everything about her. Which is to say, well enough to know without asking whether she needed to talk about the day, or whether the cooking and the humming were handling it. She hummed that song most often when she was tired, in the particular way of someone who has given a great deal of themselves and needs to come back from the distance it put her in. It was the coming home song, the returning to herself song. And when she was gone, I kept humming it because it was the only way I had left to feel her come home. My wife Rachel died 11 years ago. She was 40 years old. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, as it often is, and gone quickly after diagnosis, in the way that late-stage cancer is often merciful in its efficiency, even when it is merciless in every other way. We had been together for 12 years. Isaiah was 15. The loss reorganized everything, which I say not to describe the depth of it, because the depth of it does not need describing to anyone who has been through a comparable loss, but to say that what it reorganized included my relationship with sound. Rachel was a musician, not professionally, but completely. She played piano the way some people breathe, as the natural expression of her interior state, and she sang in the kitchen and hummed in the garden, and had a particular way of filling silence with melody that I did not notice until it was gone. And then noticed constantly, the way you notice the absence of a sound you had stopped registering as sound and only understand as such once it has disappeared. The silence after Rachel was a different quality of silence than any I had encountered before. It was not the silence of a room with nobody in it. It was the silence of a room where someone used to be. I started humming to fill it, not her songs at first, whatever came. But gradually, over the months after she died, her song came back to me the way things come back when you stop trying to hold them, and I let it, and it became the thing I hummed when I was working. When my hands were moving and my mind had found the particular floating state that physical work sometimes induces, when I was not thinking about Rachel, and was therefore most fully in the parts of me that she had shaped, the song is not famous. She had learned it from her mother, who had learned it from her mother, a melody without a title that existed in their family, the way certain things exist in families, passed down not through instruction but through air. I do not know its origin. I know its shape, and I know what it means to me, and I know what it felt like to hear it coming from Rachel in the kitchen on an ordinary evening, which is the feeling of being entirely at home. I hum it in the corridors of the Harrington School for the Arts, and it goes further than I intend, and on a Tuesday morning in March, it went all the way to the end of the East Corridor, on the second floor, and reached a 9-year-old girl who had not spoken in 7 months. I want to tell you something about working in a school for the arts for 14 years before I tell you about Vivienne, because the context matters, and the context is not what most people imagine. Most people imagine a school for the arts as a place of constant performance, children always rehearsing, always demonstrating, always in the mode of showing what they can do. The Harrington is not like that. Or rather, it is like that in the visible hours, in the rehearsal rooms and the recital halls and the corridors before a performance. But in the in-between hours, in the early morning and the late afternoon, and the ordinary midweek days, when nothing is being performed and nobody is watching, the Harrington is something else entirely. It is a building full of children who feel things very intensely and have been given a language for those feelings, which is the language of music and movement and visual art and drama, and who carry that language with them the way other children carry ordinary language, as their primary instrument for being in the world. These are not fragile children. They are often the opposite. But they are children for whom the interior life is vivid and close to the surface. And when something happens to the interior life, it tends to show in the work in ways that would not be visible in a different kind of child in a different kind of school. I have watched this for 14 years. I have watched children arrive unable to play after a loss and watch the music come back. I have watched children disappear into their art during a difficult period and emerge from it changed in ways their teachers recognized, and I recognized, and the children themselves did not always understand. I have watched the building hold them while they worked through things that had no other vocabulary. This is what a school for the arts actually is, underneath the performances and the recitals and the impressive resumes. It is a building where the work of feeling has a place to go. And I have been the custodian of that building for 14 years, which means I have been, in the most literal and least glamorous sense, the person who keeps the space in which that work happens clean and functioning and available. I take that seriously. I have always taken it seriously. It is the best job I have ever had. The girl's name is Vivienne. She is 9 years old. She came to the Harrington 2 years ago as one of those children who arrive in a school for the arts with an ability so specific and so formed that the teachers talk about it in the careful, understated way that teachers at performing arts schools learn to talk about the children who are genuinely exceptional, which is to say with admiration that is trying not to become expectation and failing at the edges. Vivienne sang. She sang the way some children draw or the way some children calculate, as the first and most natural expression of herself, without effort and without performance, and without any apparent awareness that what she was doing was unusual. She sang in the classroom and in the hallways and at recess and during lunch, not constantly but continuously, the way breathing is continuous, as the background condition of her being present in the world. And then 8 months ago, something happened. Her father left, not died, left, packed his things on a Tuesday and was gone by Thursday and had not returned and had communicated with the family, since only through attorneys. Which is a sentence that I pieced together from the fragments that circulate in a school building when you are the custodian and are therefore present in rooms where important conversations happen and invisible to the people having them. Vivienne stopped singing, not gradually, all at once. The same week, the song that had been the background condition of her existence simply stopped. And what replaced it was a silence so complete that the teachers who had grown accustomed to her voice in the corridor could feel its absence, the way you feel the absence of a sound you had stopped registering. She stopped speaking shortly after. Not entirely, not immediately, but in the weeks that followed her silence became more total until by November she was communicating at school almost exclusively through gesture and expression. And what her teachers described in the careful clinical language of school documentation as selective mutism was what I watching from the corridors with the particular understanding of a man who had once lost his own music and knows exactly what that loss feels like from the inside. Understood as a child whose voice had gone to the same place her father had gone and had not yet found its way back. I want to tell you about Margaret before I tell you about the afternoon meeting, because Margaret deserves to be understood as more than the CEO mother with unlimited resources who could not solve the one problem that mattered. Margaret Holloway is a person who has been building things her whole life: the firm, the portfolio, the reputation, the specific kind of competence that allows you to look at a problem and know immediately which levers to pull. She built all of this while also being a mother and a wife, and then a suddenly single mother. And the combination of those things is not a small thing to carry, and she carries it with the particular efficiency of someone who has decided that efficiency is the only reliable tool she has. What I knew about her from 2 years of observation was that she was not a cold woman. She was a woman who had been required by the circumstances of her life to be more together than is natural for any human being, and who honored that requirement with a discipline I could not help but respect even when I suspected, watching from corridors, that it was costing her. The week after Vivienne's father left, I saw Margaret arrive at the school to pick up her daughter, and she sat in her car in the parking lot for 7 minutes before coming inside, and I knew, because I had been watching people process things in cars for 14 years, that those 7 minutes were the 7 minutes she allowed herself to not be together before the doors of the building required her to be. She is not a cold woman. She is a woman who loved her daughter with everything she had, and who had everything except the specific thing that was needed, which is not a moral failure, but a fact about how love works. Which is that having it does not automatically supply the language it needs. Her mother's name is Margaret Holloway. She is 46 years old. She is the founder and chief executive of a wealth management firm in Chicago that manages, by the numbers I have gathered from the general circulation of impressive facts about impressive parents in a school like the Harrington, a substantial portfolio for a substantial number of clients. She is a woman who presents, in the brief interactions I have observed from corridors and entryways over 2 years, with the specific composure of someone who has decided that composure is a professional obligation and has honored that obligation so consistently that it has become structural, load-bearing, part of the architecture of how she moves through the world. The composure was more visible after Vivienne's father left, not because it cracked, but because it was more clearly work. The week Vivienne stopped speaking, Margaret retained a child therapist who specialized in trauma-related selective mutism. When that produced limited results, she retained a second one. She brought in a music therapist, which was a wise and sensitive choice, and the music therapist worked with Vivienne for 6 weeks without reaching the voice that had been there before. She consulted with a neurologist who confirmed there was no physiological component to the silence. She arranged for Vivienne to spend time with a vocal coach she had trusted in previous years, a woman Vivienne had adored, and Vivienne sat in the sessions with the polite stillness of a child who is present but behind glass, receiving without transmitting. The performance of engagement rather than its substance. 7 months of this, 7 months of every available resource applied, with the full force of a mother's determination and love, and the voice stayed where it had gone. I watched this from the corridors. I said nothing. I was not asked. I was the custodian. I mopped the floors and I hummed Rachel's song, and I watched a small girl with the most naturally musical presence I had seen in 14 years of working in this building sit in silence and wait for something she could not name. The Tuesday morning in March was not a dramatic morning. It was the kind of morning that does not announce itself as significant in any way, gray and ordinary. The kind of Evanston March morning where winter is still present in the temperature, but the light has started doing something different. Starting to have an opinion about spring without quite committing to one yet. I was mopping the east corridor on the 2nd floor at 7:45, which is before most of the students arrive, which is when I do the floors that see the most traffic during the day. I was humming. I always hum when I mop. The corridor carries it in the way I described. Further than I intend, around the corner and down the length of the hall, and apparently, on this particular Tuesday morning, all the way to where Vivienne was sitting on the bench outside the music room, where she had her first period class. She had arrived early, which she sometimes did, I learned later, because arriving early meant being in the building before the other children, which meant less of the social navigation that had become difficult since her voice went away. She was sitting on the bench with her coat still on and her bag in her lap, and she was doing what she usually did in the minutes before class, which was nothing visible, just being still in the way she had learned to be still. When she heard something come around the corner that made her stop being still, I did not know she was there. I was around the corner, mopping, humming, thinking about nothing in particular, thinking about Isaiah and whether he was coming for Easter, and whether the weather would allow the drive from Portland, and the song was just what it always was. The background condition of my working, the thing Rachel left in me that comes out when my hands are busy and my mind is somewhere else. And then I heard footsteps, quick ones, the specific sound of a small person moving fast toward something. I looked up from the mop. Vivienne was standing at the end of the corridor. She was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in the 7 months I had been watching her from corridors. It was not the polite stillness. It was not the careful management of absence. It was the face of a child who has heard something she recognizes and does not understand why she recognizes it and needs to know. She said, "What is that song?" I want to tell you what happened in the seconds between Vivienne's question and my answer. Because what happened in those seconds is the most important thing I did, and it was not planned, and I want to be honest about that. What I did not do is what I think most people would do, which is immediately and warmly tell her everything she asked, the name of the song if I had one, where it came from. All the context that a caring adult would typically rush to provide when a child suddenly speaks after 7 months of silence. I did not do that, not because I had a strategy. Because the moment was so surprising and so fragile that something in me understood, the way you understand certain things below the level of thought, that the wrong response could close it as quickly as it had opened. So I did what Rachel taught me, which is what she did when a family she was working with said something important and unexpected. I got still. I received it. I let the question be there without immediately filling it with an answer. I looked at Vivienne standing at the end of the corridor, and I let her see that I had heard her and was taking her question seriously, and was not going to rush past it to whatever came next. This lasted maybe 3 seconds, and then I answered. I want to tell you what those 4 words meant in context, which is to say I want to tell you what it means for a child who has not initiated a verbal exchange in 7 months to cross a corridor and ask a question of the school custodian. It means that something got through. Not through the managed, careful approach of the therapists, not through the structured invitation of the music therapist, not through the loving and desperate efforts of a mother who had spent 7 months deploying every resource at her disposal. Through a song coming around a corner that nobody planned to send, through a habit of grief that had been in me for 11 years, without my knowing what it was for. Vivienne was standing at the end of the corridor, and she had said 4 words, and she was waiting for an answer. I told her the truth. I said I did not know what it was called. I said my wife used to hum it. She used to hum it in the kitchen when she was cooking, and I had learned it from her. Vivienne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is she still alive?" I said no. She died 11 years ago. Vivienne looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you still miss her?" I said yes. "Every day." She nodded. She said, "My dad left." I said, "I know. I am sorry." She was quiet again. And then she said, "Can you teach me how you hum it?" I said yes. I hummed it again, slowly, just the first part. She listened with her whole face, and then she hummed it back. The first note she had made in 7 months. Quiet, uncertain, half the volume of what I had produced, but exact. The pitch perfect. The melody there. She had it in one hearing. I said, "You have got it." She hummed it again, slightly more confident. We stood in the east corridor of the Harrington School for the Arts on a Tuesday morning in March, and we hummed Rachel's song together, the custodian and the girl who had lost her voice, and the corridor carried it the way it carries everything. Further than intended, into the rooms on either side, and down the hall and around the corner, and into the particular air of a building that was designed to let music travel. Her teacher found me at lunch. She said something had happened with Vivienne and she needed to know what. Because Vivienne had come into class that morning humming something under her breath and had answered a direct question from the teacher with a full sentence for the first time in 7 months, I told her what had happened. She stood in the lunch corridor looking at me with the expression of someone for whom a great many things had just reorganized themselves. She asked me to come with her to speak with Margaret Holloway that afternoon when she came to pick up Vivienne. I said I did not think that was my place. She said, "Mr. Bonner, please." Margaret Holloway arrived at 3:15. The teacher spoke with her first, briefly, at the entrance. Then Margaret came to find me. I was cleaning the music room. She knocked on the open door. She said, "Can I speak with you?" I said, "Of course. I want to understand what happened this morning." I told her. The mop, the humming. Rachel. The song with no name. The 4 words Vivienne had said from the end of the corridor. The lesson in humming that was not a lesson, just 2 people in a hallway sharing something that one of them needed. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to thank you." I said there was nothing to thank me for. She said, 7 months. 7 months and every specialist I could find, and today my daughter answered a question out loud in class. There has to be something. I told her what I tell anyone who arrives at this moment in a conversation like this, which is the honest thing and the only thing I know how to say. I said the song was not mine. It belonged to my wife. She gave it to me and I kept it the only way I knew how, which was to keep humming it. It went further than I meant it to. That is all that happened. She was quiet again. She said, "What was her name?" I said, "Rachel." She said, "Rachel reached my daughter." I said, "Yes. I suppose she did." Margaret looked at me for a moment. She said, "What do I do now?" I said, "Ask Vivienne to teach you the song." She looked uncertain. I said, "She will know it. She heard it once and she has it. That is what singers do. Ask her to teach you and let her teach you. That is all." She nodded. She went to find Vivienne. I finished cleaning the music room. I put away the supplies. I locked up. I drove home. I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea, and I thought about Rachel. About the kitchen and the cooking and the sound of her voice, filling the ordinary air of an ordinary evening. About 11 years of humming a song I did not know the name of because I did not know how else to keep her close. About a 9-year-old girl at the end of a corridor with the face of a child who has heard something she recognizes. About the way sound travels in a building that was designed to let it. Some things travel further than you send them. Some things you carry for years without knowing what they are carrying you toward. Rachel hummed that song in every room she ever lived in, and then she was gone, and I carried it out into the world in the only way I knew, and 11 years later it went around a corner in a school corridor and found a little girl who had lost her voice. It gave her back the first 4 words of the rest of it. I want to tell you what happened the following week, because the following week is the resolution, and it happened in a way I did not anticipate, and which I think is the most important part of the story. Margaret had done what I suggested. She had asked Vivienne to teach her the song. Vivienne had taught her. I know this because on the Monday after the Tuesday in March, Margaret dropped Vivienne at the school entrance in the morning the way she always did, and as Vivienne was getting out of the car I heard, very faintly through the open car door, Margaret humming, not well. Off-key in the specific way of someone who is trying to learn something by ear that they have not yet fully internalized, but present, attempting. And Vivienne, on the sidewalk with her bag, turned back toward the car and corrected her. One note, just a gesture toward the right pitch, the way a music teacher makes a small correction to a student who almost has it. Margaret tried again. Vivienne nodded. The car door closed. Vivienne went inside. I do not think either of them knew I was watching from the service entrance. I was not watching. I was taking in a delivery. The scene was simply there, available to anyone paying attention. The custodian was paying attention. He is always paying attention. It is the whole job. I called Isaiah that evening. He answered the way he always answers, immediately, as if he has been waiting. I told him the story. He was quiet in the way he is always quiet when something is sitting with him. Then he said, "Dad, Mom's song found someone." I said, "Yes." He said, "She would have liked that." I said, "I know. I know she would have." He said, "Play it for me." I said, "Isaiah, you know I cannot carry a tune in a bucket." He laughed. It was his mother's laugh. I had not heard it in 11 years, and I heard it right then in my son's voice on the phone, and I held it for a moment the way you hold something that has been gone and has come back, carefully, with both hands, grateful for every second of it. Then I hummed the song. He hummed it back. We hummed Rachel's song together in separate cities on a Tuesday evening in March, and it was exactly what it had always been, which was the most ordinary and the most important thing. Before you go, I want to ask you one thing. Is there something you have been doing for years without knowing it was a tribute? A habit, a song, a way of making coffee, a route you take on a walk, a thing you say at a particular moment that belonged to someone else first. I am asking because I want you to consider the possibility that what you are carrying is not just for you. That it may be traveling further than you know. That somewhere in the world, or in your own building, at the end of a corridor you have not yet walked down, there is someone who needs to hear what you have been humming all along. Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you are carrying. Tell me whose it was first. I read every single one, and I would be honored to know. Hit subscribe if you have not yet. Leave a like so this reaches the person who needs it tonight, and I will see you in the next one.